Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Roberts, and in this episode, we're delving deep into a conversation that at least half the population will want to be a part of. We're talking about women's health, specifically our hormonal health and the way our bodies, brains, and hormones change throughout the years. Hormones are like the CEO of our bodies. They affect so much, and yet we can often forget just how powerful they are. But under the surface, a whole lot is going on. So what do we need to know? And how can parents help their daughters become more empowered with their health? Luckily, I've got naturopathic Doctor Sarah Vadeboncoeur with me to help us better understand the common hormonal issues we experience at each stage of life so that we can take control of our health in a more proactive and holistic way. So here we go. Episode 24 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. My guest tonight is no stranger to this show, and I knew she was the one to help us understand our hormones better. I always love getting the chance to learn from naturopathic doctor, clinic owner, mother, and overall amazing woman, Sarah Vadeboncoeur.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you for being back. I always love when you're here bringing your wisdom, your energy, and your passion for your work. And what I love so much, as you know, is your way of doing things. You look at symptoms and you deal with symptoms,
Right.
But you go below the surface. You take this holistic view. So when it comes to our hormones, what I'm wondering if you can kind of give us the overview of the main female hormones.
So there's 5 hormones that we're really going to focus on today. So the first one is estrogen. So estrogen is really important for our ability to ovulate. So it plays a big role in terms of creating that healthy egg every month, making the uterus friendly for us to become pregnant. But it's also our lubricating hormone. So I always say estrogen is what makes us juicy. So it keeps our skin looking good, keeps our vaginas from drying out, and it also plays a big role in terms of our joints staying, free from arthritis and things like that.
Because it's funny, I think when people hear lubrication, we immediately think of sexual lubrication,
Yes.
but you're talking everything.
Everything is lubricated, our eyes, our skin, our joints. So estrogen plays a role in all of that. Progesterone is very much our calming hormone. So progesterone is made after we ovulate, and it helps us to feel relaxed. It helps to calm anxiety. It helps us sleep better. It's a really important hormone when we're looking at fertility. And it's also really important because it balances estrogen. So estrogen and progesterone really work together. They both have things that they're doing in different areas. And it's really important when we'll talk about hormone balancing later that they're working together well.
Okay.
Testosterone is the next one up on our list. So testosterone we often think about for men, but women also have testosterone. Testosterone is very much like a driving molecule. So really important in terms of mood, in terms of giving us that get up and go. Also plays a key role in terms of our sex drive. And it's also important in terms of strength. So helping us to maintain a good balance of strong muscles versus fat tissue. So testosterone plays a role in that.
When you were saying driving hormone, you mean that one that when you want to go and do something, that it's the testosterone that's going to get us out of bed and to the gym or to do any activity?
That's right.
Okay.
So estrogen and testosterone are more of those energizing, kind of driving type hormones, whereas progesterone is there to balance that out so that you're not going full pin all the time. Progesterone is there to keep you calm and relaxed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But progesterone, you were saying, only gets produced after ovulation.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we look at women who are menstruating, we typically see 2 different parts of the menstrual cycle. So the first part, which would be from the start of the period until ovulation, tends to be much higher in terms of estrogen. And women will often see that after their period, they often have lots of energy, they feel really good, they're social, they want to get out and do things. And then after you ovulate is when you get a big surge of progesterone. And women will often find they are, more reclusive, thank you. They want to stay in more. They don't want to socialize as much. They often feel a bit more tired. They want to go to bed earlier. They just want to curl up and kind of be alone.
It makes me feel like we should all be sort of tracking how we're feeling every day throughout a month, just to get a sense of what's happening below the surface.
Absolutely. And also realizing that you're not going to feel the same way every single day because your hormones are different throughout your cycle. So a big part of looking at hormones is also learning to embrace kind of those natural cycles and to try to use them to your advantage, as opposed to feel like you're, being robbed by your hormones or that things
so maybe
are negative.
Staying home and relaxing with your partner when you're feeling that nesting feeling,
That's right.
calming feeling, and then getting out and being social when you feel that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and listening to those cues, right? I always say our bodies are like so smart and so wise. We're just not very good at listening. So this is a perfect example of tuning in and listening to how you're feeling and trying to give your body what it needs at different parts of your cycle.
Yeah, I love that. So I know we want to kind of walk through the ages with female hormones.
Yes.
And so let's start with, I guess, pubescent girls that are just getting their period, like just getting their hormones. And so, oh my gosh, do young girls have hormones at all and then only get them up, like at the point that they get into puberty?
Yeah.
How does it work?
So we definitely have hormones, different lower levels, certainly at birth, and levels will gradually rise up until typically estrogen is the one that's going to come up to a certain level, and that's what will start to trigger puberty. So we'll start by seeing signs of sexual development. So the breast will start to develop. We might see hair under the arms and pubic hair. Those are usually the first signs. And then eventually girls will start to have their period. So puberty is basically a time where the body is learning how to create a regular menstrual cycle. And one of the things that I see a lot in my practice is that we have this tendency to put young girls on the birth control pill to regulate their cycles. We'll talk about in a minute how the pill doesn't actually regulate, but one of the things that's important to know is in that first year after a girl gets her first period, she's typically not ovulating yet. So yes, I know. I just learned this and it blew my mind.
Yes.
So
because we're born with as many eggs as we'll ever have.
Yes. So we have all the eggs, but the hormones haven't created that good rhythm yet to create that regular menstrual cycle, which triggers ovulation. So it's completely normal for girls to have irregular periods for the first couple of years as their body adjusts and figures out how to create this monthly cycle. So we often jump in and want to intervene because we think, well, it's not regular and like I don't know when my period is coming, and it's a very difficult time. I remember when I first started my period, it's very awkward, especially if you are younger. But just for parents to know and to tell girls, like this is actually a very normal phenomenon, that your period is not going to be perfect right off the bat, and it doesn't mean we need to intervene in any kind of way.
What great advice.
Yeah. The other thing that a lot of girls are seeing around this time is that they're getting very painful periods. Again, that might be because they're not ovulating, so they're not getting that nice surge of progesterone. So their periods can be more painful and more uncomfortable. And certainly we want to help manage that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the birth control should be the first kind of tool to manage that.
You mean because a lot of doctors will say go on the birth control pill to manage pain.
That's right. And to create a regular cycle. And so one of the things that I always screen for women who have extremely painful periods is a condition called endometriosis. Endometriosis is a condition where the inside of the uterus, that tissue grows outside of the uterus. So basically it can grow on your bowels, it can grow on your bladder. And so every time you're getting your period, that tissue is basically like bleeding and being inflamed. So you're going to get incredible amounts of pain. And so, you know, one of the things that I always try to help people understand is what's normal versus what's not. It is normal to have a little bit of discomfort and maybe some very mild cramping with your period. It is not normal to have to miss school or work, to be like doubled down on the floor in pain, or to have to take painkillers throughout your period. Like they're common things, but that's not the normal way that our periods should be happening. So endometriosis would be one of those things that they should get screened for. The hard part with endometriosis is there's no test for it. I know.
So we get screened for it how?
So it's through symptoms and ruling out other causes. But any woman who has, again, significant period pain, especially if there's any rectal or low back pain with the period, and diarrhea. A lot of women and girls with endometriosis will have diarrhea during their period, and that's another sign of some of the issues that are going on. The only way we can confirm it, sadly, is through exploratory surgery where we go in and look. And obviously we're not going to do that, you know, unless it's absolutely necessary.
For sure.
The other thing that we often put girls on the pill for is an irregular menstrual cycle. So again, a reminder that those first couple of years it's completely normal to have an irregular cycle. If after many years or even into your 20s or 30s you still have an irregular cycle, the most common cause of that would be PCOS. And PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. I know it's a mouthful, but essentially what happens with that condition is that women are not ovulating, and so they're not getting a regular menstrual cycle. Women with PCOS will often have acne, they'll have hair loss, they'll tend to put weight on easily, and a lot of that is driven because they tend to have higher levels of testosterone than women without PCOS.
I've heard that they can grow hair. I haven't heard hair loss. I've heard that they can develop facial hair.
So I always say you'll grow hair in places you don't want, like your face, your breasts, your stomach, and you're going to lose head hair. So it's a really not a nice combination of symptoms, and you'll often get acne.
What can be done if we have PCOS?
So the underlying problem for PCOS for most women is actually a blood sugar issue, and the blood sugar issue is what triggers the body to make testosterone, which then causes the imbalance in the cycle. So again, when you're using the birth control to regulate, you're not actually dealing with the problem, which is the blood sugar and the testosterone. And for a lot of women, once they come off the pill, these symptoms come right back because they haven't been dealt with
So women have this issue in their teens, stay on the pill for 20 years, go off the pill, all of this comes right back.
Yeah, and often they're coming off to try to get pregnant, and then they find out that they have some hormonal issue that might make that more difficult, which can be really hard. So I want to make it clear in terms of the pill, I know I'm talking about all the downplays or the downsides. I am not against the birth control pill. It's a very effective form of birth control when it's used properly. I think we just need to inform women about the pros and cons so that they can make informed decisions, because a lot of women and girls are starting these pills pretty early, and they aren't being given some of this information to make those decisions. And one of the biggest things that I see is that women are being told to take it to regulate your hormones, and that's a myth that I try to dispel in my practice all the time. So I talked about earlier, when you're not on a birth control pill, a normal month you'll have a surge of estrogen as well as a surge of progesterone. So your hormones are doing kind of this beautiful dance, if we can call it that. Doesn't always feel that way, but it's really this coordinated dance that they're doing to trigger ovulation and then pregnancy or period. When you're on the birth control pill, you're getting the exact same level of estrogen and progesterone every day. So instead of your hormones having these natural fluctuations, your estrogen and progesterone are exactly the same throughout the entire month, which you're not balancing again, you're just basically taking over. So because your brain senses that there's estrogen and progesterone, it tells the ovaries, you don't need to really make anything because I'm getting it somewhere else.
Oh my gosh, more with Sarah after the break. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking about women's health on this show, and I've got naturopathic Doctor Sarah Vadeboncoeur helping us navigate our way through the various stages of a woman's life, and we've made it to the childbearing years.
Yes.
All right, so what are the most common complaints at this stage, and what can we do to help?
So often once women are entering their kind of later 20s or early 30s, some of the habits that we might have had in our teens and 20s don't really work for us anymore. So if we're not getting enough sleep, we're not really eating the right foods, we're staying out late, one of the most common things that women seek me out for is fatigue. So they're feeling exhausted and tired. And so certainly hormones can play a role in that, especially if people are overworking and undersleeping.
Which we all are.
Which we all are.
Yeah.
And then you throw on lack of sleep, you throw on some nutritional deficiencies, which are really common for women, and it just creates this cocktail where women are just exhausted because their body's not necessarily getting the nutrients and things that it needs.
And then they get pregnant.
Yes. So one of the things I always tell my patients who are trying to get pregnant, I'm like, as soon as you're pregnant, the baby will take everything from you.
Yeah.
So if you're heading into pregnancy with your like energy and your nutrient levels like already not great, they're gonna tank when you become pregnant and afterwards as well, especially if you plan on breastfeeding. So one of the things that I chat with women about who are planning to become pregnant is to really optimize all of these things in the months leading up to them trying to become pregnant so that they head into their pregnancy as healthy as possible, which is going to help them hopefully feel a bit better during their pregnancy and also create better outcomes for them and baby. So one of the common things that we also see in this age category is PMS. So women are just not feeling good the week or two before their periods. They're irritable, they have zero patience with their partners, they often have breast tenderness, they might have like cravings where they just can't get enough chocolate or other sweets. And that can really ruin people's quality of life. And it can also take a big toll in terms of their relationships.
And can I just make the point?
Yes.
None of these symptoms are normal.
Right, yes.
And I have a hard time because I think most women experience breast tenderness, cramping, craving chocolate, craving salt. Like we all feel these things, and I think we all just talk about PMS like it's totally normal. To be expected.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point, that being a woman does not mean that you have to suffer with all of these things we've talked about. You don't have to suffer with painful periods. You do not have to suffer with PMS. Again, are you going to feel a little bit different the few days before your period? Maybe. Should it change your quality of life or change how you're able to go to work or school? No. So it's about that kind of degree of symptoms that we're seeing. And one of the most common imbalances that I see in this age group in the 20s and 30s is too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. And so
I was going to say, and how does that happen? But you keep going.
So it happens because we, sadly, in our environment have lots of chemicals that look like estrogen. And so when we're exposed to them, our body thinks it's estrogen. So plastics are a perfect example. Chemicals like parabens, which are found in a lot of personal care products.
Like shampoos and creams and lotions, yes.
And think about how many products most women use. Think about how many products young girls are often using. So those are things that we look at. So it's kind of how much estrogen are you making and what's coming in, but also is your body getting rid of estrogen? A lot of women are constipated, and I'm sorry to have to talk about poop, but I'm going to do it.
Please talk about poop. You know how much
I need to be pooping every day.
Yes.
That's like a non-negotiable. That's one of the first things I work with on women. If they're not pooping every day, number one, you're not getting your waste out. And the way that we eliminate hormones when we're finished with them is by peeing and pooping.
Oh, wow.
If you're not pooping every day, your estrogen is going to stay in your body and can create an excess. And if you're not drinking enough water, which most people I see are not, again, if you're not having good kind of elimination through your kidneys and your urine, you're also not clearing out that extra estrogen. So it's about trying to limit, again, what's coming in through trying to avoid some of these chemicals in the environment, but also making sure your body can get rid of what it doesn't need.
And are you saying that even the synthetic estrogen that we're taking with plastics and different things, that also needs to be eliminated in our waste?
As much, yes. Oh yeah, everything that comes in has to be kind of metabolized and eliminated.
Yeah, okay.
So you've got those two causes for high estrogen. And then with progesterone, again, women don't ovulate necessarily every month. Even if you have a regular menstrual cycle, there may be a month or two in the year that you don't ovulate. Those are months where you're not going to make progesterone. So again, you get this big imbalance where you've got lots of estrogen and none of progesterone, and that can really trigger lots of PMS symptoms. And then women who have high levels of stress often will also have lower levels of progesterone. And you'll often see that when you have, I noticed this for myself, when I have a really stressful month, my PMS is worse, and I can just tell that my body's not feeling 100%, whereas most months I'm very lucky. Like, I have essentially no symptoms, my period shows up, I carry on with my life, and I kind of start again.
And with that situation, is that because our bodies are stealing our progesterone to make cortisol to deal with the stress?
Yeah, so that's a common, it's not actually a steal, but cortisol and progesterone are made from the same starting molecule, the same starting hormone. So yes, if your body's under stress, it will choose to make cortisol, which allows you to survive, which means there may not be a whole lot left to make progesterone. So you are going to feel more of these PMS-like symptoms if you don't get that nice surge of progesterone.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the childbearing years, obviously we're talking about sex.
Yes.
And I know that for a lot of women, they find that their sex drive tanks after they've had a baby.
Yes.
What can we do there?
Absolutely. So again, keep in mind that it is normal for your sex drive to be a little bit different immediately after having a baby.
Yeah.
You've had some physical trauma. You have a new little person that you have to deal with. You're usually sleep deprived, and your relationship is going through a major change. But it should come back, and that's what a lot of women, it never comes back after they have kids. And again, that's not normal. So the way that I like to describe what's happening with our sex drive is kind of like driving a car. So you've got your gas pedal and you've got your brake. Your gas pedal are the things that turn you on and get you excited. So these are like nice times with your partner. It could be a warm bath. It could be like a loving touch, just spending good quality time that kind of gets that fire going. A lot of women, have issues there, but most of us, the problem is the brake. We are driving around with our parking brake on, and the parking brake is anything that shuts down your sex drive. So it could be if you're not feeling supported at home. It could be that the time of day doesn't work for you when your partner wants to have sex, or the type of relationships that you're having aren't necessarily working for you. A lot of women have body shame or don't feel comfortable. They might have mood disorders. So there's so many things that can cause that parking brake to come up. And for most women, that's the problem. It's not that they don't have a sex drive, it's that it's buried under this, all these things that are causing it to not awaken, if you will.
I feel like the sexiest thing my partner can do is help me do things at home. And, it's not about the massage or this other thing. It's like take out the garbage and the recycling and help me to get things done. And then I'm feeling so much more supported and loving towards my partner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love to explain to people is if we look at kind of from an evolutionary perspective, our bodies want to reproduce, right? We are here, and our main goal that our body's always trying to do is reproduce. So obviously, innately, we have this desire for sex.
Right.
The problem is that our modern world is not conducive to that. So when your body shuts down your sex drive, it's actually trying to protect you, and it's trying to protect you from getting pregnant. So when you're, overworked and overtired, and you have multiple kids to already look after, or, add whatever stress you want on there, your body's not going to encourage you to engage in sex, because sex obviously increases the risk of having babies. And if you've had any babies, you know that they tend to increase your stress levels, right? So the body is actually doing this as a protective mechanism. It just doesn't necessarily feel that way. But that's why I'm so passionate about explaining what the body's doing, because once you understand why these things are happening, you can start to look at your life and your relationships and see where some changes might be made to help kind of take off the parking brake, put the foot on the gas, and reignite some of that.
And develop the relationship with our bodies and ourselves. When we can get quiet enough and get the information that we need, we can start to cultivate that relationship with our own bodies. We have 2 minutes. What about thyroid issues in women in childbearing years?
Yeah, so anytime there's a major hormonal change like pregnancy, but also with menopause, the risk of developing thyroid issues goes up, because all of your thyroids are talking to each other. All of your hormones are talking to each other. So if one of your hormones goes through a change like pregnancy, the thyroid can cause issues. So when moms are extremely tired after having kids, or they're losing excessive amounts of hair, they're not losing the baby weight, or they're putting on weight, these are some of the signs and symptoms that for me would be a flag to get thyroid checked. And one of the things that's interesting is after you have a baby, your baby has checkups every few weeks or every few months, and moms get nothing, right? Unless there's a severe issue, we're not being looked after. So I always encourage women, you should be having regular appointments with your doctor after you have a baby, and you should be requesting blood work to make sure that things are still balanced in terms of your thyroid, but also your nutrient levels, especially if you're breastfeeding, because again, you're giving so much nutrition to your baby, which can cause deficiencies for you.
I think too many women put ourselves lower and lower and lower down the totem pole, the list of priorities. And we don't take that, and we also don't want to say to our doctor, I want to be tested every 6 weeks, or I want to, because we feel like we're putting them out, or we feel like that's too much, or that's asking too much. This has to stop. We have got to take the control back. We have got to take our health seriously. No one else has to live in these bodies. We have to live in them.
Agreed.
We're going to keep going. We're going to get into perimenopause after the break. So more with Sarah when we come back. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. If you're just joining us, we're talking about women's health and the role our hormones play on this show. And we've made it to our 40s and where most women experience perimenopause. What is perimenopause and sort of what age is normal to enter it?
Right, so perimenopause is basically the period between the end of having kind of a regular monthly menstrual cycle and menopause. And menopause is really 1 full year with 0 bleeding. That's when you can throw your party and call your friends and tell them you've hit menopause.
Okay.
So perimenopause is that whole time in between. So for some women that's only a few years. For some women it can be like a decade.
And for most women, is it the 40s that
Yes.
it starts? Most women, like what happens if somebody starts to go into what they think is perimenopause in their early 30s or mid 30s?
Right, it can happen. So there are some cases where the ovaries will fail prematurely. And so if you are having symptoms that you think might be caused by menopause, having some testing early on may help you to see if that's in fact what's happening, especially if you are still planning on having children. That would be really important to know.
Yeah.
Most women will start to experience it in their early to mid 40s. And often how I describe perimenopause is women just say, I don't feel like myself. And that's kind of, they can't necessarily put like a specific name on it, but they just know they're feeling different. So some of the symptoms that we'll often see with perimenopause is that the periods will start to change. So your cycle can start to be longer or shorter, meaning your period might not come when it used to. It might start coming a week later, it might start coming a week earlier. So we're really starting to see a shift in terms of the periods being a bit different.
And the length of time of the period, does that change too?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, the other part is the period itself. So that can shorten or lengthen. Also the amount of blood that you're gonna lose can also change. And one of the things that a lot of women really suffer with around perimenopause is they start to get these very heavy periods. And so they literally have trouble managing the amount of blood loss every month. So yes, it can really obviously interfere with your quality of life, but also can cause severe anemia and iron deficiency because of the amount of blood that's being lost.
Is this safe or like is
Right.
this normal for some women?
Yeah, so it is very common and it can be normal, but obviously if the amount of blood is unmanageable, then obviously we want to intervene because there can be obviously issues in terms of severe blood loss and anemia. So the reason that that's happening, again, as you go through your 40s, your ovaries are gently starting to wind down. And so you're starting to run out of viable eggs. And so if you don't have as many viable eggs, you're not going to ovulate every single month. And again, when you're not ovulating, you're not making progesterone. And so if you've got lots of estrogen still in your system, but you don't have progesterone, you're going to have a heavier period every month. And so that's often what's causing these heavy periods, is that women just don't have enough progesterone to balance out the estrogen. So that's one of the things that we always screen for. And there are some treatment options available, like taking progesterone can be very helpful in those cases to help reduce the amount of bleeding that women are having.
Okay.
The other things that we'll often see, because again, progesterone is dropping, is that women start waking up in the middle of the night and they're like, I have no idea why, but I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I'm having a hard time getting back to sleep. And they'll also start to feel more anxious, or they'll feel like things that maybe 5 or 10 years ago they could easily manage and deal with is becoming harder for them to manage. And again, a big part of that is that progesterone is our calming hormone. So when it starts to drop, we have a harder time staying relaxed. We tend to feel more anxious. We might have a harder time managing stress and just kind of unwinding.
Like we stay in that fight or flight,
Yeah.
as opposed to being able to get into the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest.
That's right.
Right.
So those are kind of the common things we'll see. We'll often see just increased PMS as well. Again, because you don't have that progesterone surge, you're going to have worsening PMS symptoms. And then you may also start to have things like hot flashes and night sweats that are just maybe starting every once in a while, but aren't necessarily happening on a regular basis. So perimenopause is basically the reverse of puberty, where the body is like slowly winding down and getting ready to stop the menstrual cycle, which is what would happen with menopause. So one of the things that I always chat about with my women that are in their 40s that are going through this is I explain to them what's happening in terms of hormone production. So when you're in your 20s and 30s and early 40s, most of your hormones are coming from your ovaries. That's where your estrogen and your progesterone are being made. Once you go through menopause, your ovaries are shutting down, and your hormone production now mostly comes from the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are also your stress hormone makers. So if you spent your 20s and 30s and 40s in high stress situations where the adrenal glands have been constantly trying to like put out cortisol and keep you surviving, and now you add the stress of menopause coming in and they now have to make estrogen and progesterone, that does not go very well for a lot of women. So a big part of what I work on with my perimenopausal women is to help them implement good kind of lifestyle and diet strategies so that those adrenal glands are working properly and so that that transition is a lot smoother in terms of their hormone production.
What are those strategies?
Yes, so sleeping enough. A lot of women are kind of staying up too late or getting up really early. So making sure that you're getting at least 7 or 8 hours every single night of good quality sleep. Going back to what you said earlier, we have to put ourselves back on our priority list. It's something I'm so passionate about because it's really like life or death for us. And it's also for our family's sake. Like I think a lot of us think that we're doing our families a favor when we're giving everything we have to them. But your family's also learning coping skills from you. And so if they're not seeing you model healthy eating and, you know, taking care of yourself, they're not magically going to learn that somewhere else. So it really is important for the whole family for you to lead by example.
I think that's such an important point to make. Children don't listen to what we say.
No.
They watch.
Yes.
They model.
Yeah.
So when mom isn't taking care of herself and she's run ragged and she's stressed out, daughter is watching that and saying, that's how you are. That's how you behave in life. That's what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of those coping strategies we learn from those kind of first relationships that we have. So it's so important. Also eating regular meals, you know, providing your food with nourishment and good whole foods, which sounds so ridiculous to have to say, but it needs to be said. We need to eat good quality foods. We need to eat at regular times. And, you know, you and I have talked about this, getting your health looked at on a regular basis in terms of things like nutrient levels and hormones, like just keeping on top of what's happening internally so that you can catch some of these things that are happening before they become like a full-blown issue, and making sure that you're dealing with any, you know, deficiencies, any kind of overt hormone imbalances. But I gave this example to a patient the other day. When you wake up, think of your iPhone battery. It's fully charged, right? We wake up hopefully with a fully charged battery, and a lot of us don't even have a fully charged battery when we wake up. We spend our days running around like, you know, a chicken with our head cut off, and so no wonder by the end of the day our battery is completely dead, right? So it's about creating a life where it's not just like you're burning energy from the minute you wake up until the moment you go to bed. It's creating opportunities to put some of those energy building activities back in, and that's different for all of us, right? So again, you know, balance may or may not be the right word, but it's about creating a lifestyle that like fuels you and doesn't just drain you every single day.
I love that. I think it's so true. I think if we often look at our schedules, a lot of us can say, it's all draining. It's all, you know, work and picking up the kids and doing things here and shopping and all of these things that are draining of energy.
They are.
You've got to fill the cup.
You do. And like a lot of women wake up and there's nothing in their day that's for them. So like that to me is very depressing, and I would have a really hard time getting out of bed if my entire day was created to serve and help other people and to not have anything on it for me. So the 40s are a really great time to start to explore some of these things. Often our children are a little bit older, so we're able to carve out a little bit more time for ourselves, but it's such an important part, especially if you want to ease that transition into menopause.
We've only got a minute or so left, but I'm just thinking, so if we know that we're in perimenopause, we're noticing the waking up early in the morning and all of these different symptoms of lower progesterone.
Yes.
And we don't want to necessarily do hormone replacement therapy. We're not looking at that. Is there a supplement that we can take to boost our progesterone naturally?
Yeah, there's 3 things that I use a lot. One would be magnesium, which I love for a lot of things, but it helps with sleep and helps with progesterone. The other one is vitamin B6, which is really important for helping progesterone production. And the third one is a herbal medicine called Vitex or Chaste Tree. And that is one, I know it has a
How do we
name.
spell? So Vitex?
Yes.
And Chaste, Chaste?
Yep.
Tree. Chased tree. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a herb that naturally just tells your body to continue making progesterone. So there's nothing hormonal in it. It's really just about kind of telling your body that everything is safe and okay, and that it can continue to make progesterone. And that can make a big difference for women with PMS and for perimenopause.
So any woman that's kind of dealing with that can go and talk to either a naturopathic doctor or a health food store, and they can find this?
Yeah, these are all available over the counter. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're working with someone who knows what is appropriate for you.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the key, is finding someone that you trust.
Yes.
And that also knows your normal.
Yeah.
I think that's key too, right? Like knowing what each of us, our normal is.
Yeah. And who believes you, I would add to that. Because a lot of women are being dismissed, unfortunately, in the medical system with these symptoms, and are being told, like, it's part of aging and you just have to deal with it. And for me, that's unacceptable. You know, women shouldn't be suffering throughout perimenopause. Yes, it is a time where there's lots of change and things are going to be different, but you should still be able to enjoy, you know, a relatively good quality of life if you're looking after some of these hormonal kind of changes that are happening.
Amazing. You always teach me so much when you come on. I love it so much. After the break, Sarah's going to help us smooth sail through menopause. Back in a moment. If you're just joining us, we're talking about women's health on this show, and we've made it through perimenopause, and now we're into menopause. So what's happening with our hormones now that we're in full-blown menopause?
So with menopause, as I mentioned, it's really that you've gone a full year without any bleeding or spotting. And what's happened is your ovaries have essentially gone into retirement. They've done their work, and they're basically producing, you know, little to none in terms of estrogen and progesterone. So as I mentioned earlier, most of your hormones at this point are coming from the adrenal glands, and that's where you're now making your estrogen, your testosterone, your progesterone.
Like whatever little bit we're making, like how does that work? So we're no longer producing hormones in the ovary, in the ovaries. We're now producing estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone in the adrenal glands, as well as cortisol.
Yes.
Anything else?
Those are the main ones. And DHEA. So DHEA is a common hormone we hear about with anti-aging. And the reason it's so important is that DHEA is made in the adrenal gland, and it can convert into estrogen and testosterone.
Okay.
So if you have low levels of DHEA as you get older, you're going to have more signs of aging because you're making less of the estrogen and testosterone. So it's made in a slightly different way, but it's still the same hormones. They're just coming from a different place. The other thing I'll mention quickly is that women often get this like 10-pound weight gain in their midsection, which they're really unhappy about. And one of the things I like to explain to them is that your body, again, infinitely wise, is trying to get estrogen. The third place where we make estrogen is fat. So again, if your estrogen levels are too low for your own body's kind of comfort, it's going to try to get a little bit more estrogen. And the way that it does that is by depositing fat in your midsection.
Wow. So, okay, I'm sorry if I keep belaboring this point, but so we've stopped making the hormones in our ovaries, but we are making those hormones in our adrenal glands, but not much.
No, not to the same level, because now the body's goal is not to become pregnant anymore. So we don't need the same high levels of hormones that we would. And so it's absolutely normal to have a reduction in terms of estrogen and progesterone levels after menopause, because now your body's goal is completely different. You're not trying to reproduce. Having said that, there's a big difference between kind of a normal drop in hormones and what a lot of women are having, which is they basically have what I call undetectable levels of estrogen and progesterone. And so for most of my menopausal women, I'm testing their estrogen and progesterone. And literally the lab doesn't measure under a certain amount, and most of them are under there. So like it's either so little that the lab doesn't even care to measure how much is there. And the reason that that's important is that while we don't need the same hormone levels of a 30-year-old, we still need some estrogen and progesterone and testosterone because they're really important for our bone health, They're really important for our brain health. They're really important for our heart health, our mood, our memory. So we still need a certain amount of these hormones in order to continue to enjoy a good quality of life, but also to reduce our risk for lots of different types of diseases.
Because I think a lot of women just think, well, if that's the natural progression and that I was to lose my hormones, why am I going to mess with anything? I'm just going to leave well enough alone, and I'm not going to take anything or do anything to change it. They feel like that's normal, but you're saying not optimal.
Not optimal. And it depends. Maybe, and some women do. Some women still make, sufficient amount of hormones after menopause to, not have any symptoms and to keep their different body parts healthy, but a lot of women aren't. And so some of the symptoms that we'll see with menopause, with low estrogen and progesterone, definitely the classic kind of hot flashes and night sweats are very common. But we'll often see cognitive changes, right? Where women are like, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like I have no memory, I can't remember things. Often the mood will change a little bit where they feel more depressed or more easily anxious. They'll often have lots of difficulty sleeping, either because they're being woken up from night sweats, or they just can't sleep properly. And then everything dries out. So going back to estrogen being our lubricant, women will find they have drier skin, they might have dry eyes, they will have vaginal dryness, and they'll often start to get joint pain. And a lot of women don't realize that these like arthritic pains and stiffness can also be due to low estrogen, because estrogen is also lubricating all of our joints. So these are some of the symptoms that we'll commonly see that can really take a toll in terms of a woman's quality of life. And that's where exploring different, hormone balancing options can be beneficial. If you're really, I think that menopause absolutely is a natural process, but I also don't think menopausal women have to suffer, during their entire menopausal years. Mm-hmm. Some women, are having trouble working because they're literally having severe hot flashes during the day. They might not be sleeping well at night, so it really takes a toll. And all of those things can also, have some negative health impacts. So the nice thing is that there are hormonal and non-hormonal ways to help women through menopause. So for women who prefer a non-hormonal approach, we're basically just trying to help, again, stimulate your own production through the adrenal glands. And that there are great herbs that can help in terms of helping with hot flashes and night sweats. One of my favorite things is something called sea buckthorn. Mm-hmm. It's an omega-7 fatty acid. Mm-hmm. It's been shown to help with the vaginal dryness of menopause. It's also great just for the skin and anything that needs to be lubricated a bit better. There's great...
Before you keep going, so I love sea buckthorn.
Okay.
How do you like your patients to take it? I take it in the actual seed and just put it into a smoothie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
I usually get it in supplement form, so it's like a small capsule with the oil inside. But yeah, if you can get it in a food source, would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of my favorites. There's also a great product that I love called Cala Gel. It's actually made by a Canadian company, and it's a great non-hormonal tool for helping with vaginal dryness.
Calagel?
Yes. Yeah, and that's available in local health food stores. It's kind of an over-the-shelf, over-the-counter product. Dietary stuff. So ground flax seeds, 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds has been shown to help reduce hot flashes.
And that would be every day, 2 tablespoons
every day,
of ground,
ideally.
freshly ground. I love that. I use a coffee grinder.
Yes.
I put it in my smoothie.
Yeah.
I put everything in my smoothie.
Smoothies are great to put all your stuff in there. So those, there are lots of things that we can do. And again, just supporting those adrenal glands so that they have a chance to make these hormones, that they're not being, preoccupied making cortisol.
I was going to say, so that's the deal, is that we need to support the adrenal glands by calming them down in order for them to do their job in menopause, which is now to create estrogen and progesterone, as well as cortisol.
The other thing to keep in mind is that we're living longer.
Yeah.
So most women, knock on wood, we're living into our early to mid 80s on average. So we've got 30 years for most of us that we are living post-menopause. So yes, it's absolutely normal to have lower hormones, but over 3 decades, what might that be doing to, again, our bones and our brains and our other different body parts?
So obviously we need to see a naturopathic doctor to go below the surface, but I want to know, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Yes.
pros and cons of hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah. So a lot of women are really scared about hormone replacement therapy because they've heard about all the negative things that can happen. And certainly depending on the type of hormonal therapy, there are some potential side effects. So especially when we're looking at oral estrogen and synthetic progesterone, those have been linked with a slightly increased risk of breast cancer, and they may also increase our risk of blood clots. So those are things that a lot of doctors are not using anymore because they have increased risk. But there are other forms of hormone replacement therapy that don't have those increased risks. So instead of taking estrogen by mouth, we have lots of different ways that we can use it by the skin. So either in a cream or a patch form. You can also use it vaginally. And this is a generally safe way to increase your estrogen levels, manage your symptoms without increasing your risk of some of these other concerns. And the other really important part, which we talked about in the beginning, is always keeping estrogen and progesterone balanced. So you want to make sure that you're working with a practitioner who understands this, and that if you're taking estrogen, really important to take enough progesterone, again, to protect your breast and protect other parts that might be stimulated by estrogen.
And how would we take that progesterone then?
Yeah, so progesterone can be taken by mouth. Prometrium is kind of the most common one. And when you take it by mouth, it does have additional advantages in terms of sleep and anxiety. It's more calming the way it's metabolized, but you can also use it through your skin, which is great for like the night sweats and hot flashes and anxiety.
Like you can have a cream made for you.
You can have a cream, yeah. Exactly. And some of the advantages with hormone replacement therapy is that it reduces your risk of osteoporosis and fractures. It can reduce your risk of heart disease. It can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. So there's lots of additional benefits. And what I always find interesting is we're also scared of breast cancer, and breast cancer is very scary. But we actually are way more likely to die of heart disease than we are of breast cancer, and we tend not to think about that, right? So it's also putting the risk in perspective. You know, obviously some women are better candidates than others for hormone replacement therapy, but it's about having that conversation with women and looking at, you know, what are your hormone levels, what are your symptoms, what are your other risk factors, and what is the best course of action for you based on all of that information. But most practitioners will now feel that the benefit of hormone replacement therapy for most women outweighs some of these potential risks. But obviously it's very important to, you know, keep an eye on some of these potential risks and to be followed by someone so that you're minimizing your risks.
The reason for being in touch with someone like you.
Yes.
We've got 30 seconds left. I want to know from you, what's your big overarching message that you want women to take away from tonight's episode?
I want women to know that their bodies want to be healthy. You know, our bodies are designed to feel good. We're designed to be happy and healthy. And so it breaks my heart when I see women who are putting up with like a low quality of life and just assuming that that's just how it's going to be and that there's nothing to do. There's so much that we can do, you know, in terms of our nutrition and our lifestyle and our hormones to feel good and to give our like full selves out into the world, and to be, you know, great moms or great business people or whatever it is that like, you know, makes you happy. You can't do that if you don't have your health.
You're amazing. I know so many women and men learned so much tonight. Thank you for being here with me. When we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. It's a common predicament for women, being natural caregivers, that we can put everyone else's needs ahead of our own, and our health can fall lower and lower down the list of priorities. But it's important to keep it in first place if we want to have the kind of energy it takes to care for our people, as well as do all the things we want and need to do at the various stages of our own lives. As a woman, I found it incredibly empowering over the years to learn more about my health and to surround myself with experts who can help me understand my changing body as I enter each new stage. So often we fall into the thinking that things are just the way they are with our energy, our weight, our sleep, our pain, our mood, and that there's nothing we can do, brushing our health issues aside. But as we've learned tonight, we can push back on this assumption and reclaim our right to good health. Our bodies are always, always trying to heal, and they are always, always talking to us. It's our job to become quiet enough to listen and then to seek solutions that will lead us closer to feeling our best. Thank you to Sarah Vadeboncoeur for taking us below the surface in order to understand our hormones better and for showing us that we don't have to be slaves to them. We can harness their power and take back the control in our lives. We simply must prioritize our health if we want to age gracefully and gratefully. I want that for me, and I want that for you too. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing, that no matter where you are and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.